friend of mine was going to lease me his ranch in Eastern Oregon. And he called me up and he had a brain tumor and he wasn't going to last very long. And so I went to Idaho to buy some sheep because part of his outfit was a sheep outfit. And part of it was cows, which by then I had both species. And the time I got back, it was too late, but I made connections with some people that when I said, well, I don't need the sheep, I didn't get the chance to lease purchase this ranch. And they said, well, there's a real big outfit down in Nevada, why don't you come and look at it? So I came and looked at it, took my banker down there, and we were going to do it. Well, then the price of sheep shot up because they had a moratorium on how many sheep they could bring in from New Zealand, and it was upheld, so they couldn't bring in all these imports. And the price of sheep went from $65 a head to $85 a head. Well, the coyote wouldn't turn them over to me. So I went to Idaho, was going to trade cattle. I bounced around and I ran into the guy that had this place leased and talked to him and come and looked at it. And next thing you know, here, it's September 4th, 1985, I moved into that old shack down there in the bottom. So a lot of these buildings have been moved. Been here ever since. Had a 5-year lease.
And how did your conflict with the Southern Nevada Water Authority begin, and what's some of the background? I hear they've been trying to buy ranchers out.
Well, they basically bought every ranch between here and Las Vegas. And a lot of them had pretty good water rights. Well, they bought the neighbor out down here from a water company. And that water company, I partnered with them on and ran my sheep. We partnered, and then they sold me all the sheep AUMs on that ranch. Well, over here in a place called the Tippet, everybody here calls it the 12-mile pass allotment. Government calls it the Tippet Pass allotment. And it's about 70% steep and black sage. Steeper than a cow's face, and black sage, which cows won't hardly eat. And there's one little flat down there that was white sage. Well, the guy that used to own it didn't argue with the government, and he put most of it as a cow range, even though the government knew it wasn't. And they had a lot of political capital, and they ran a few cows in there, but they never ever did the paper transfer. It was always a sheep permit. Well, anyhow, when Vidler Water signed an agreement that they would go through with this 3-year monitor study to see what was actually sheep AUMs and what was cow AUMs, which would have ended in November of 2004. Well, in June of 25th of 2004, Vidler Water sold me the sheep AUMs. So I went to the BLM and said, hey, you haven't got your monitor study done yet, and I now own the sheep AUMs in the Tippet Pass allotment. Is there any information other than that you need? And they looked at my deed of trust, which is not a deed, but it's sort of the formula, the deed to be picked out later after you make your payments, and it has the terms and the conditions in it. So anyhow, the BLM never did do the study.
It's been 20 years, and they said it was going to be 3.
You got it, cowboy.
Well,
but here's the thing: the guy that did it was whatever. He had his career clock on the corner of his desk, and he wasn't going to do nothing. But you can't go in the BLM office and grab somebody by the shirt and say, hey, oh, dang it, let's get this done or I'll knock you on your ass. I mean, you can't, you have to, yeah, as a boss, I'll be shuffling. Don't hit me no more, boss. So, 2000, and even if they had completed the study in 2004, there would have been a period of compilation of the study. Give it 2005, 2006, let's be nice. So in 2006, they should have had some sort of a formula, some sort of a white paper saying this is how we're going to divide this up, this is what is what.
Now I've read that technically you're supposed to not be using that pass anymore, and that would technically force you to cross 4 mountain ranges with the sheep. And
that was just punitive damage. There's 3 sections in the Tippet Pass allotment. 2 of them are under contest. The one right up the street here is wide open. It was always sheep. Nobody ever contested it. So let's go back to say 2006. There should have been this white paper that I could have read, set down, and fine-tuned it, and appealed it, or whatever I wanted to do, and say, hey, you know, that portion of the Blue Mass section is steep. That's sheep country. No, you know, we got to make these adjustments. And I assume, even though Southern Nevada Water Authority is a state agency, they have no right to graze. There's the caveat that if you buy a piece of property that has a permit attached to it, you can, as a state agency, you can lease that base property. The person you lease it to, private individual, can go into the BLM and say, I just leased Jimmy Jack Johnson agency, state agency permit, and or base property that permit's attached to, and they'll fill out the papers. And you have to lease it for a minimum of 3 years. But not the state agency. But they had Harry Reid in their corner. Who was going to contest the most powerful man in the Senate in Washington, D.C.? They were demanded that they do, you know, Chris Mayer was told, you will issue a permit. All of this stuff. Just complete abuse of power. And if you read the application to graze, it talks about perjury, it talks about lying, it talks about, and they signed her off. Yeah, we're okay. I mean, this was all crooked as a dog's hind leg, but it was powerful, powerful inside the Beltway people. Who's going to argue with that? I wasn't dumb enough to argue with them. Well then, in I think 2007, 2008, Southern Nevada Water Authority buys the Robinson Ranch. So I was on the tax commission, state tax commission, and I was in Carson City at the Legislative Council building, and I get a phone call. This guy working for Southern Nevada Water Authority has attacked your sheepherders. And Jose hid in the brush all night, afraid to come in. The other one, this gentleman kicked over the propane tank, and the hose came off. It had raw propane blowing in the air in October.
Have they killed any of your sheep?
Not that I know of. But we could have killed that man if that propane would have, but anyhow.
Did you ever find out who it was?
Oh yeah, I know, I just wasn't going to say it. Yeah, it's a court record now. I've spent a lot of money fighting this deal now. This is ridiculous.
Well, what motive would the Southern Nevada Water Authority
have?
Well,
okay, bully pulpit. They don't have to answer to anybody. They're the big dog. Well, I knew their supposed ranch expert. Unfortunately, other than having a cowboy hat and having gone through the chairs of the Cattlemen's Association, he didn't know anything about ranching. You know, he didn't know whether Christ was crucified or shot in a crap game. You know, if everything he knew about eastern Nevada ranches was gasoline, it wouldn't get him halfway around the dime on a Honda 90.
So these are more college-educated people.
Beautiful resume. Gotta have a beautiful resume. You can spend 50 years out here, but if you don't have a beautiful resume, you're nothing. What could you possibly know? You're a dumb sheepherder. So anyhow, I called him up. I kissed a lot of hiney. I was smart enough to know they could crush me like a bug. So I tried to suck up to them. Well, I couldn't get the job done because they had their own crew that they wanted to bring in. Or whatever, who knows what their thinking was. But they alienated, they could have been the best neighbor for all the ranches all the way from here to Vegas. But they alienated everybody, treated everybody, looked down their nose at us. And when they walk into the parts store, they don't pay sales tax. They're driving a pickup that has exempt license plates on it. I mean, and they're competing against you. I think somebody told me Southern Nevada Water Authority had a $600 million annual budget. So $63 million that they spent for these ranches that were worth about $10 million. Ah, shit, that was coffee and donut money, comparatively speaking.
So if they're trying to buy these ranchers out for a, inflated cost, you're saying that you stay here because it's kind of in your blood. You prefer to ranch here.
I'm the Bedouin. If I got snow in the wintertime, haul a little water when it's dry like it is now, some springs in the mountains and a little grass, my family should get to turn the lights out when the party's over, because there is a finite amount of water under this ground. Everywhere in every valley in the state of Nevada that they've drilled a lot of wells, the water table drops. Imagine that. So if you start pumping 365, 24/7, and the water's not being put on the top and then subbing back into the ground, going to Las Vegas, you got some real hassles. You got some things some mitigation that you have to do, maybe removing all this pinyon and juniper off of these mountains. There was a fire on the other side of the mountain over here last year. There's reservoirs over there. Some of mine didn't even know existed because they were so jungled up with the pinyon and juniper. They're full of water in the driest year in 128 years. Those trees have put this whole country here in a negative recharge of the aquifers for probably 80 years, getting worse and worse and worse. But the reason Spring Valley doesn't have a bunch of circles in the bottom of it is because the soils are so prohibitive. The fact that it subs, the kind of crops that you could raise, they're so limited, and at this elevation, nobody ever did anything other than file on the creeks, and all they did is move the riparians up here where they could farm them, where they could raise enough hay to feed their livestock. At the bottom of the valley was untouched. So all this crap was going on. So I tried to make friends with these people. I called up the gentleman with the cowboy hat and the great resume in Denver, Colorado, had his personal cell phone number, and I said, hey, you didn't get those permits off of that ranch. Huh? Oh no, we got everything. I said, no you didn't. Oh yeah, we got them. I said, well, you better check it out. I don't think you did. That's what's made that ranch run and be cheap. 2 hours later, he calls me up. Oh, Hank, I go, you're right, we didn't get them. I had the permit next to it leased. I had another permit, and part of it that they didn't contest with me. So I could park my sheep camp over here. The fence only ran up the hill a little ways. The herd management area document that Don Padlock for Vidler Water signed in 2001 says right in it, Spring Valley and the Red Hills was the normal places that they run the sheep. Well, guess where the Red Hills are at? And guess where part of Spring Valley's at? And then my exhibit, it's in the office, I'll show it to you. Everything in Antelope Valley. Well, the rest of the drainage is Antelope Valley or Spring Valley. Part of the Red Hills drain. I mean, all of this stuff. And at any time, the BLM could have sat down and settled this. Any day. And they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't even talk about it. You want to empty out the Ely BLM office, go in and say, let's discuss the Tippit Pass allotment. Like quail.
Why wouldn't they just sit down and talk to you about it? You'd think that they would resolve it.
Well, you'd think they would. But when you've got the biggest dog in the state, every one of them would say the same thing. It was like it was tattooed on their wrist. Hey, this is a career ender. I got to have some time. Hey, don't push this deal. Just wait. We'll take care of it. So the actual influx of the jackbooted thugs wasn't until 2007, and somebody must have gave them marching orders how to treat everybody. I mean, wouldn't you think they'd be smart? But it's like, we're from Las Vegas. It's like the movie Casino. The consigliere says, what do you mean we're out of water? We need water for our fountains. We need water for our toilets. Who the hell's got water? Ranchers. Okay, go buy some ranches, get us some water. Get. Well, then if you go to an engineer, you say, can you come up with a figure on what it would take to build a pipeline to Hank Vogler's house in North Spring Valley? Well, yeah, I'll have to have a retainer. No problem, I'll write you a check. You're certainly going to write a really nice report, But the Natural Resource Conservation Service has a map of this whole country. See that hill over there? That's all black sage. You put a bunch of cows over there, and you better have them in a corral and on wheels and roll it around, because they will pull out of there in 2 seconds. But you could winter sheep there for several months.
Ito ang guardar.
Maybe poner en la oficina, yeah.
Tres lo matamos, cada para el liceo.
All right. They had no rhyme or reason to do this. They could have been the best neighbor on the earth. But they didn't want to do that. They wanted to show everybody they could do anything they want. And I guess they can. So far, they've gotten away with it. Well, according to the state laws that I've read, you know, I was on the tax commission for a long time, so I kind of had to brush up on that stuff. I didn't want to be stereotypical, the dumb farmer that was a token contribution to the committee, so I kind of did my homework. And one of the things is that with a simple majority in the Senate and a signature of the governor can dissolve any subdivision of the state of Nevada. Clark County, I think, used to be Lincoln County.
Vámonos ahora. Ahí está el campo. Okay. So, ¿cuál quiere? ¿Usted tiene buena idea? ¿Usted tiene mejor agentes? No, está bien.
Can you sort of broadly explain the Sagebrush Rebellion? Would you consider yourself a part of it? Or at least the fight over water rights to be a part of it?
Small world, lad. While we were having our troubles with the new management system at the Malheur Wildlife Refuge, I had a friend that was connected in Idaho. He used to work for me on the hay crew when he was a kid. And he was connected in Idaho. He got me into a cocktail party, which at that time cost $1,000 a pop. And he got me into it for free in J.R. Simplot's house after a meeting at the Red Lion in downtown Boise. Jim Watt, the Secretary of the Interior for Ronald Reagan, who was the original Sagebrush Rebeller. Or he said, put on the cowboy hat and said, I'm a Sagebrush rebel. And his best buddy was Paul Laxalt from Nevada. So anyhow, all these people are walking up and their wives had mink coats on and jewels dripping off of them, and I could hear JR say, "What do you do?" "Oh, well, I'm the president of the biggest corporation here in the state of Idaho." "Oh, come on in. Yeah, I know you." You know, I'm going, what the hell am I going to say?
It sounds incredibly like a movie.
Yeah.
About
Oh, yeah.
corruption.
Yeah. I felt like Forrest Gump, you know.
But I'm sure you seem smarter than 90% of the people in that room.
So anyhow, I walk up. "Hi, what's your name?" "Hank Vogler." "Well, what do you do?" "Well, mister, I'm a sheepherder." And he says, "God, I used to run on." He started telling me all about his sheep business. He says, "Hey, you ought to see this stuff. I got this whole basement full of electronics. Brand new stuff." And I said, "You can't leave your wife sitting out here, sir." "No, hell, she likes this. I can't stand it. Come with me." So he takes me downstairs. There's a couple of senators. I'm not going to tell you everything that went on down there. A couple of senators, Wheels, congressman, and Jim Watt comes walking in. Now, he was supposed to be a pretty religious guy. And this is crap that you remember. He had a hole in the bottom of his shoe and his sock was sticking out. And he was mad. I watched him at his news conference. I got into the news conference. Only news people got in there, but my friend got me in. Wonderful speech. Made complete good sense. Sounded good for the country. It wasn't no radical screaming view, but that's what they wanted it to be. So anyhow, he's kicking like a punter, kicking his foot up, and there was that sock sticking out of the bottom of his shoe. And he had met somewhere. I don't know if he'd gone into Nevada or they had met him in Boise or what. But he had met with a contingency of folks from Nevada. And Ronald Reagan had just been elected, and guess what? They were going to turn over all the federal BLM land in the state of Nevada over to the state of Nevada. And this delegation, who I didn't know one of them at that time, heard their names, but I ran into them years later, of course, turned him down, wouldn't take it, wouldn't take the state lands, the federal lands of the state of Nevada. They were going to, make a constitutional issue. All the other states, under the equal footing doctrine, got their state lands. Texas wouldn't join the Union unless they got their land. The only land that the federal government owns in Texas, to my knowledge, is stuff that they've purchased and was sold to them by the Texas legislature.
So you're talking, well, this is, I find the difference between federal ownership and state ownership interesting because the BLM has police. Is that not using federal police for...
They used to not have police. I never saw one until later on, I think in the 90s even. All this country was all patrolled, if it was ever patrolled by anything, it was by the sheriff or the game commission. The game cop would be out and about. But as far as federal police, that didn't come along out here. Now maybe, at the Lincoln Memorial or something, or January 6th. Wait, how come everybody forgot back when I was a teenager, them marching and destroying property and going to Washington, D.C. to protest the Vietnam War and all of those protests? And back in Hoover was there, I think, and a couple of times they called out the army and shot people. I mean, there has always been the right to protest in the United States, but we're getting off the subject. But anyhow, this delegation from Nevada, and of course I later on met him. I never said nothing. I didn't know he said, horse shit don't stink unless you stir it. But they named some names, and I remembered those names. But they were going to turn that over and make a test case out of it to the state of Nevada. Now, with what's happened in Clark County, it would have had to have been a pretty solid way to write it up. Back in 1981 or whenever it was when they were having that meeting, Clark County was still powerful, still the biggest dog in the fight, but not as threatening as it is now over everything. Hell, Reno's more out of water than Las Vegas. I mean, it's you build a town in a desert that has a limited supply of water, it's pretty short-sighted. I think the Pyramid Indians at Pyramid Lake, if they got the water back that they've allowed to go into the water district in Washoe Valley, they could dry up probably a bunch of stuff. They'd have to give them all the water that comes down the Truckee.